future, AI in climate and sustainability, AI in privacy, AI in government policy, AI in quantum computing, and AI in space exploration. Wow, it's a
Yeah.
multidimensional field. We seem to be. It's more like a very qualitative aspect. We're going too broad, so we need to narrow down.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I was just thinking from those, which is the one that calls out to you the most as a topic that you think is
I like
okay?
this AI in morally. I like AI in employment, but
Yep.
profession-wise, AI in government and policy,
Yeah.
and hobby-wise, AI in creative industries. So, if I go in three different dimensions, and also morally AI in
Yeah.
healthcare, AI and ethics is a bit of it's a dry topic. It's a lot of reading. Ethics is human ethics is multidimensional. It comes from different societies. Indian societies' ethics is different. Religious societies' ethics are different. Democratic societies' ethics are different. And
Yeah.
it will also come under subjective analysis. So, but what is general artificial intelligence approaching or impractical?
What? Sorry.
General artificial intelligence, or discuss the concept of AGI where machines can perform any intellectual task a human can, and whether this this is a realistic future or theoretical concept. Well, coming from a viewpoint
I guess
of
it's
coming from a viewpoint of security, privacy, trustworthiness, technologies. I think the future is it's not about just features over. It's not just features. It's going to be a technology in which humans can believe in its capability, right? So I think for which people need to establish some kind of trustworthiness over these systems. So that's why there's an emerging topic called trustworthiness AI, or trustworthy AI. So whatever these use cases we may explore.
Can we unpack that a little bit? When you say trustworthy AI, does that mean if you ask ChatGPT a question, it doesn't come out with an answer that it's decided that there's parameters of what?
So ChatGPT is just merely a model trained on large billions of data of token, right? So we can't particularly rely on it making a conscious decision. Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
input in, input out.
Yeah, and also if you question the decision making or the transparency in which the way it made the decision, it's not very much like as a human we can understand its decision making, right? Because it's not transparent. It's a black box kind of situation, and it can be prone to be influenced with various data sets and biased ways of looking at certain things, right? So therefore it can't be very trustworthy.
Right, yeah.
And also if you look at it for a society that has been westernized and other stuff, maybe this is applicable, but not in different other societies, because the data sets, and for example, like in some tribes in Africa, we may not have the data sets for us to train on such models, and therefore there's a lack of inclusivity of such tribes. Also, in India right now, or even in Abu Dhabi right now, they're using the Falcon model for training Arabic and Hindi, the different languages. So AI is also there. We only trained on English models. There are not other languages that are considered. So it's so many things. So for us to establish trustworthiness on a system, and also there's a lack of emotion in such AI models, right?
So when you say trustworthy, are we looking? You think we're looking at? So just we'll go back a second. When it seems like in ethics, humanity, there is no like agreed taxonomy on ethics apart from certain like pretty vague areas, which is like war crimes, UN war crimes, for example. We agree that genocide, for example, is the extermination of a people, blah blah blah. Whereas an ethical decision might be, is it correct to misrepresent, whether a product actually does what it claims to do, which what we find in marketing, for example, we say, well, in one culture that's sort of unethical. In another culture, it might be perfectly acceptable. So it seems like we don't have agreed taxonomy across all cultures, which would make it makes it complicated. When you're talking about trustworthiness, are we also talking about nuances like interpretations in languages? So, like for example, there might be a word in Arabic. I don't speak any Arabic, but I do know words in other languages where there is no translation in English, for example. Like there's no word, there's no concept for it.
Yeah. Another thing is that when we are sat in an interoperable society, right, there's also lack of interoperable framework, how two different AI models can communicate with each other. For example, the ChatGPT model, when they want to interact with the Falcon model in United Arab Emirates, there's a lack of interoperability. The framework to establish interoperability. So there's so much things to explore, and given that circumstance, now it falls down to your use cases, right? You may have only one particular model with lack of interoperable understanding of different use cases. An implication of space exploration can have an implication on the human health. So an AI would not be able to suggest that, because of exploration of, if an astronaut goes up to the hill, up to the space, his human blood because of the lack of oxygen, there could be some kind of implication in the human body or gravitational forces. And I mean, that is just an arbitrary example, but, there is a huge gap in that aspect, if you know what I mean. So interoperability framework, there's a huge research, and trustworthiness, that's also a socio-technical problem. Humanity has to
massive.
Humanity has to come.
If I may, it's like when in human history have humans across the world agreed on anything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When have we ever agreed on people from all cultures, all at the same time? When have we ever agreed on one specific thing? That this is correct.
Yeah.
It seems like to scale this, there's a lattice or a matrix to create in order to ensure what trustworthiness means.
Yeah. So, given these contexts, AI in various use cases is understandable. So, I think right now what people are doing is they're broken down the problem into nuanced subsets, and they're starting to target, like, can we make a sub model for this particular use case, given the data is particularly controlled, and we can train that, and we can probably, for example, an example is a chatbot for customer service agents, right? So, in that granular level, they are working out so that they can understand the transparency of such models, because it depends on how much of the data that we have fed into that model for that kind of decision making. But if you break down the problem to sub problems and focusing on how decision making is working, is happening. I guess there's some kind of deductive way of studying the operation of a granular model, I suppose. And then from there we can if you look at the tree, we can probably see what the decision making has occurred in the sub node, and then as a consequence the leaf node would have had an implication on that, and then decision making concept could have been derived from such uh, derivations. Um, but yeah, AI is the future of AI is interesting in various sub use cases, but it needs a lot of uh, security, privacy studies, resilience, reliability, robustness studies, and of course, ethics is one of them. But without studying the consequences of the decision making, how can we even understand ethics uh, um, of AI model? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you? So currently, when I was in New York, there were, and I think there's a number of cases still ongoing, both in California and in New York specifically, about intellectual property, which seems to be sort of a hot topic for the legislators. Like who owns the IP, and if it's derived from, if like ChatGPT or DALI or something like it, just something that's a part of the creative industry, whether even if it's music and it's drawing from a data set, who owns the intellectual property and is the identity of the production. Like, so for example, I think Suno is being sued by Sony, and I remember saying to my friends in New York, I was like, this is a question of time before that this happens. This argument and debate with who you like. It's almost like a sort of father-son type of thing. It's like, or the parent-child thing. Like the parent, is the child derived from the parent, or does it have its own identity? Is it a separate kind of thing? And this seems to be playing itself out in intellectual property in courts, both in New York, with New York Times, with the music industry, with Sony. There's a low. I mean, I think it's about 12 cases running concurrently in California, and I'm just talking about the US. And I imagine Europe will have a different concept of what defines intellectual property, because intellectual property laws are different in England, for example, and I imagine in European Union, and it also looks like the EU legislation is moving pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But to the point where how do you work out what input and output? Like, the input is this and the output is that. Who owns these things? And as the commercial applications, do the commercialization of AI, does it end up becoming, like a tactical thing? So America gets caught up in intellectual debates, and then countries like China are like, well, we don't really care. Just go ahead and do it. And it gives them
Yeah.
the tactical advantage when it comes to creation.
Yeah. Yeah, so because of the uniqueness of such models, people would ideally want, at least one who wants to make money out of such a profit, or make profit out of such,
Yeah.
would want to IP it because of the uniqueness of such models. But yeah, as you suggest, yeah, that will lead to also more deviations and differences than unity rather. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, and that's why I guess Sam Altman had made this idea of let's make it in an open AI model with lots of models running in the Hugging Face platform where they could be measured. Um, and also
Yeah.
now, the Falcon model and, the Llama model and other stuff. Which it all comes down to the data set being fed into such models and it's being trained. And
Yeah.
is that data set
Yeah.
curated well, balanced well? Is it unbiased, or is it just coming from one society, or is it just the internet? If it's just the internet, it does not
Yeah.
include data of my traditional villages back in India. it would have a very limited data of
Yeah.
what's happening in there's a panchayat system in my village that's not online at all. The rural India, that is one of the oldest form of democratic way of creating some kind of justice for the tribal people. I'm sorry, rural people. Those kind of things are never on internet. And what kind of data set is uh, one being trained on? It's always a
Yeah.
further question and research to be analyzed on.
I have a quick question. Llama, OpenAI. I'm actually met with a guy, Sergey, who's friends with Ilya, who from OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
and we did a panel at New York Tech Week together. He was working for Tesla at the time, and he said that the concept of open source API was also in question, whether um, OpenAI is open, and that seems to be like a debate between Sam Altman and Elon Musk, etc., and also Llama. I think its press release was that Llama was open source, and yet behind the scenes there was some question about, well, is it really open source or is it open source with a latch? And I was just thinking, do you have any thoughts on it's claiming to be open source when they're not, and what the implications that might have?
So, so this comes. I think we have to break down this traditional question: what is advantage of an open source system versus a closed source system? Traditionally, it used to be about
that's great.
Traditionally, in computer science and all, it used to be of innovation versus regulation or security. Open source leads to higher, greater creativity, ability to break down things and rebuild it. However, the user reliability decreases as things get open source. Back in the Linux versus Windows systems kind of things. People used to argue that Linux is open source. It is very useful, or even Android, for example. Android versus iOS, the greatest example. Android is used by Samsung, but they also tune it to their third-party convenience, right? And one of the problems in today's world in cybersecurity is Android is much more vulnerable in comparison to iOS.
Of course. Yeah.
So this is
when you say when it's more vulnerable, do you mean like malicious code being interjected into the open source?
Into open source, and if there is actually and we have to and open source, you have to rely on an open community, and it's kind of a charitable ability of one to actually protect the system. And such philosophy comes down to the goodwillness of people from different societies.
Yes.
And and that is a lack of and there again you have an interoperable you need to have an interoperable understanding of what is goodwillness from different society to apply onto one common framework of a system. But in comparison to a closed source system, you have a very focused set of people attacking a set of problems, and that is actually quite important if the risk of that particular problem is quite high. You need a common language and common direction, and closed source system often takes the trajectory of addressing one problem quickly and effectively for the use case that we are thinking about. So that is the only advantage. So now you take this this broad concept of open source and apply to an open source AI model or a closed source AI model. There you go. So, for example, a closed source AI model will have a very restricted set of data set in which the model is trained only for the company's, for example, a use case idea. Perhaps it could be something like H&M's fashion capability, and therefore it can make a prediction of that particular data set on a human, training room, ability to look very good and make a prediction based on that. But if you bring different fashion sets, fashionable, attires and other stuff, for example, from Zara, from H&M, the prediction would be also quite varied. So and that is the problem I'm trying to highlight over here. By open does not mean it's bad. It depends on the use case's requirement. If you have a particular company ready to just create a prediction for a particular problem, you might need a data set that is only related to that particular company. But if it's an open set, it's a broad problem, and broad set of data set might be needed. So there you go.
I guess when we look at companies like Apple, which is closed, opposed to Llama, which is in theory open source, do you see this as having any unintended consequences? As having, these very like
It comes
huge,
down to the
big
data set.
players?
It comes down to the data set,
Yeah,
what they've trained. Again, like I said, it depends on the data set and the quality of the data set and what it has done to make such predictions. And it's as simple as that if you look at it, if you break it down in that way. But yeah, Mark, just to be mindful
yeah.
of time, I need to get back at 2:30.
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we did this little test to see how it would, how things could look. And I'll send you a copy of the video. I think we did a
Yeah.
transcript as
Well,
well.
let's try and do
Something
this
to play around
similar
with.
thing another time and with much a
Yeah,
broader
yeah, exactly.
audience. And I guess it'll be a very engaging uh, outcome, and people will be a bit more, you know, no, I disagree, I agree, argumentative, and I guess
Yeah, exactly.
there
Yeah. I
could be
mean,
a
that's
birth
what,
of
yeah,
there could be a birth of new ideas.
100%. And I think over time, like if Sergey comes in, um, George, who's in Switzerland, I guess he's missed it. His time frame might be a little off. There's like other people, but I think if we could have just a broader conversation, but in this very informal style,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic you
this
brought
is what
this
I could really.
platform on. Yeah, kudos to your
Great.
hard work. Impressive, very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. All right. Well, have a wonderful, weekend off.
Yeah. I'll have to spend some time with my girlfriend over here. She's waiting in the
Yeah.
background.
All right. Okay.
All right, buddy.
Say hi
Take
to
care.
her and have a
Nice to see you
wonderful
after a long
time.
time, man.
All right.
Good to hear you looking.
Yeah. 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 Take care now.
All right. Bye bye.